Should now be live. Hello and welcome. I'm Isabel and I'm one of the producers of The Uncertain Kingdom, and we are here tonight to discuss Verisimilitude. I'm joined by the film's director, David Proud, and the film's writer, producer, Justin Edgar. Verisimilitude tells the story of a disabled actress who is hired to advise an up-and-coming star how to perform a disability for his latest role. David and Justin, for those that are unfamiliar with the term cripping up, can you tell me a little bit more about the practice, the very outdated practice, and where things sort of stand at the moment with it?
Yes,
David, this is one for you.
Yeah. So cripping up is basically anytime a non-disabled actor plays a disabled character, and we've seen it done quite a lot in films, and it's quite critically successful when people do this, and there's been a long history of it. But it's
right. So you're sort of talking about Eddie Redmayne and Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, and I think the problem is the other kind of minorities being portrayed by other people is often kind of agreed as totally offensive and totally wrong. But yet we've still got this thing where if an able-bodied person plays a disabled character, it's kind of all right, you know. So I think with this film, it was trying to spark that debate of why is it all right? Because it is offensive to, you know, well, 20% of the population has a disability, and it's an authentic portrayal. You can't rewrite the history, and I think, you know, we just need to, like other minorities, move to that point where we say this isn't, you know, this isn't good going forward. So how do we move to a place where you don't have to have, you know, people cripping up? So I think that was the main idea from Justin, was to do something that really kind of gets to the heart of that.
And so how do things sort of stand at the moment in terms of the practice? Is it something that you still see a lot, or is it something that's
I think we're at this really weird point where now if you're talking about stuff and you're saying about somebody cripping up, there's this kind of audible like, can we do that from producers? So they everyone kind of knows it's wrong, but the odd ones are still slipping through the net, and because I don't think they've got to a point where they understand how to not do it and how to still get your film made or your TV show made. So it's a little bit, we're in a weird situation where we all know it's wrong, but some productions are still doing it. So I don't know about you, Justin.
I mean, I think it is the epitome of the crassness of commercial filmmaking, really, that you trample on people's human rights and you represent people in such a derogatory and sometimes silly way as well. You know, I often say that award season is almost like pantomime season, you know, where you see people with like missing legs or whatnot. It seems like ludicrous that in this day and age we're still doing this. So really, that the only thing you can say about this, and obviously me and David have been involved in loads of debate about this particular issue over the years, and we've known each other for a very long time, you know, is to, you know, make fun of it, really. Yeah. It's satire. That's the only thing you can do, because it lends itself so well to satire, the situation, you know. And yes, we could have done something that was a serious and impassioned drama, but I felt like the best way to approach it really was to take the piss out of it, because it is patently so ridiculous. And that's where the idea for the film came from, really. I mean, I suppose it came from discussions between us, didn't it, David? And seeing David as well, and other actors, and also having actually myself ends up being involved in some films which were, you know, exponents of kind of cripping up. And you think, well, you slowly become educated, and the culmination of it was this. I think what's interesting about it as well is that the script was written originally 5 years ago, and I originally wrote it way back then, and it had a really poor response. And I'm glad to say that the Times seem to be slowly catching up with it. And this seems to be a good moment to have made a film like this, because I think people didn't really think about it as a concept or or something that was worthy of talking about within our industry. But post Me Too, Oscars So White, etc., there are arguments about diversity within our industry, and that's where the film came from. But of course, it's not just a film about disability.
No, it's not. But just sort of going back to that, I mean, ultimately, it's commissioning, and it's people putting funds behind disabled-led projects and films that explore disability, which needs to be pushed, and that change needs to sort of come from there.
Yeah, and I think what's great by doing something that's got that slightly comic feel is that people do tend to listen more. If you feel like you're being kind of preached at a little bit, I think you can switch off quite easily. So what was nice about this is doing it in a very cheeky way that certainly fits what me and Justin have always kind of worked on, really. We've always been quite cheeky in the work that we've done, but it is trying to hit that harder message to commissioners to kind of say, at the moment it's a one-sided dialogue. It's disabled artists going, we shouldn't be doing this anymore. And what you don't want is commissioners and heads of channel and everything to go, well, we're just not going to do disability because it's too hard. So, we're just going to shelve all these projects. But to fix it, you have to have the equal kind of conversation. You have to have the other part of the conversation of the top leaders in our industry saying, so, okay, how do we move to a better place? And I don't think that conversation is happening. I know we're all sitting around kind of saying, this is wrong and we should move to a better place. But you need that other person on the other side saying, okay, we completely agree. So let's fix it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of misconception about what disability is as well, isn't there? And what counts as, is there such a thing as a voice of disabled filmmakers? Is it a school of cinema in its own right? In the same way that you have black film or feminist film, and that's really interesting. It's exciting to explore as a filmmaker, because I believe that there is, a kind of school of filmmakers with disability, and I think that's something should be getting behind. But I think it's interesting that with this film, the people who backed it were Uncertain Kingdom, who deliberately wanted to make edgy, confrontational films. So we're looking for subjects like this, and also the BFI, who are at the vanguard as a public funder of attitudes towards disability and diversity. So they kind of have to back things like this, basically. So it's interesting if we took this out into the open market, as a longer film or as a TV series. I wonder how far it would have got before we got nudged along for the next project, which was led by able-bodied directors.
I mean, so your film was one of our 3 films that was up on the BFI Facebook page for about 2 weeks, and you got an extraordinary amount of views and amazing feedback. I think it was sort of like 9,000 views.
Yeah, it was crazy, and I think. I just on that point at BFI as well, one of my favourite jokes in it is the Simon Lowe line, and he delivers it so brilliantly about diversity quotas. And we're only able to do that because we're in that open dialogue with the BFI about what's right and what's wrong and trying to move to a better place. And I just think when you get to that point with a financier and with the organisation where you can have slight in-jokes, a little bit cheeky, you've moved to a slightly different conversation, which was nice. And Simon delivers it so beautifully. But it's just
the BFI. Was it an improv on the day that was just for feeling cheeky?
Was it?
Yeah, and it was just brilliant that I'm not sure you would have got that like 5 years ago. And if we could just get to that stage of in jokes with everybody. It would just be brilliant, because when you don't take yourself seriously, and when you're able to kind of it moves the whole conversation on. Yeah
And comedy, as you guys said, that it has that it's accessible in that way, it means that issues can be explored and dived into in a way that people just find easier to stomach sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, going back to the cripping up thing as well, I think it's not necessarily, I mean, I think cripping up is the symptom. You know, I think that there is institutional disregard across filmmaking and television for disabled people and disabled people's lives, you know, and depictions of disability are really problematic, and society is really problematic in terms of its regard towards disability. So, you know, it's much, much deeper than just that one issue. You know, I think the issue is the fact that there is a mistrust, as David says, and of disabled talent, and unwillingness to take a risk, you know, on making films about disability and to do with disability, where disability is depicted in a different way, you know, in a way which is not that traditional tragedy narrative, which is about overcoming diversity, which is inherently, that is about an able-bodied perspective. It's about fear of the other, fear of disability, and you see that across feminist film and black film as well. You know, I mean, it's like racist cops killing George Floyd, to me, is not, that's the symptom, you know, of incipient racism across society, you know, in the Western world. It's not just about one incident or whatever, but, you know, it's a totemic incident.
Yeah, I mean, it's about tackling this unconscious bias that disability and disabled artists are somehow less talented. I mean, but you know, fundamentally, if you have spent your life thinking that disability is a negative and that disabled people are weak and in hospital all the time, you know, are you really going to hand your £1 million budget, you know, to some cheeky chappies that come along and go, "We've got this film," you know? What we found is that most of the time people will find any excuse to say no. You know, they will literally throw projects out on such a small technicality because they just have that fear of, like, this can't possibly work as well as, you know, the people I normally work with. And what's beautiful about this film is that I think it just highlights that, you know, well, you guys were with us all the way. You know, we didn't break anything particularly. We didn't go double the budget. You know, no one had a hissy fit on set. No, you know, nothing bad happened. So you can have disabled projects and you know, not trigger the apocalypse, as I keep saying. But it's right to kind of say, you know, it was completely fine.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It seems also that the greater the authentic portrayal of disabled people on screen, and Justin, as you say, without always having these stories sort of related to tragedy and weakness, the stronger the stories are, the more authentic they are, then throughout society, these preconceptions that people have will shift. So actually, for commissioners, it's so important to put these authentic voices and faces on screen.
Yeah, and you do. I think that there's just such a depth of stories and characters, and we've all seen things that just seem like a repeat or a rehash of something we've seen before. And what I know Justin tries to do a lot of, and we've done on other projects, is try and find that stuff that is fresh, and new, you know. So, and the only way you're going to really tap into that with disability is to let disabled people lead the narrative. So that's certainly what Justin's done for the rest of his stuff.
And
I mean, you know, an interesting example is a film we did a few years ago. We went into a hospice with life limited teenagers, and we were making a film there. This was about 15 years ago, and we asked them what they wanted to make a film about, and they wanted to make a rom-com, you know, because they all had their boyfriends, girlfriends, you know, and thinking about sex for the first time, stuff like this, and that's what they wanted to do, you know. But you can guarantee that if an able-bodied filmmaker went into that environment and wanted to make a story about it would be a tragedy narrative, you know, that classic tragic story we always hear about, you know, across the panoply of cinema about life-limited people. So, so there's a different voice to be heard here, and that's what's interesting. And it has to come from the individuals. That's the thing. That's the only way you're going to make it authentic.
Yeah, we've got some crazy stories, like properly crazy stories. So, and it's just if before I kicked the bucket, we could see some of those on screen, it would be really great because I think a lot of disabled artists have got some very funny, or very heartfelt and very, imaginative projects.
Yeah.
So we've just got to get to the point where we're seeing them, I think.
Yeah. And Ruth Medley is fantastic in the film. Just, yeah, awesome. Bella, and just brings such life and strength and humor to her character Bella. Was she always sort of did you always have Ruth in mind for it, or?
Well, my wife's from the same town as her in Lancashire, and her dad works in the same charity shop as my mother-in-law. So there was a strange connection there already, and then of course you knew Ruth as well, didn't you, David? Because you have pretty much similar condition, don't you?
Yeah, we have exactly the same condition, exactly the same wheelchair, exactly the same little add-on to the wheelchair that makes it electronic. We're both madly in love with our little dogs that we've got, and so there's so many similarities. But I know that when kind of 5 years ago it was a male lead part, but it certainly took on a new life having it female, and have been able to kind of get it to Ruth and see what she thought about it. I think if it had been a male lead, you'd have kind of thought a little bit more about the jealousy that they're just jealous of this other guy that's got the job. Whereas actually by swapping it out and having it as Ruth, I think you're able to see it a little bit more clearly, as it's not just jealousy, it's missed opportunity, and it's an equal opportunity.
Yeah.
There's also something very funny about the changing it to a female lead, because there's something quite funny about a vain man as well, isn't there? And which Laurie does particularly well. I mean, he's a great foil as well, not to underestimate Laurie, because he's very funny in the film. I'd never really seen him do comedy before, but he was absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant.
No, that's I mean that as you say, that adds another layer to it, that there she is teaching this arrogant, obnoxious guy. But and so the rest of the casting, you've got amazing cameos from various different people: Alice Lowe, Simon Lowe. But in terms of when you were shooting on set, David, as you and Ruth both have spina bifida, so how do you think that sort of helped in terms of you directing her and setting up the shots? And
well, it was quite. Me and Justin had this conversation quite early on that if we could shoot it all from her perspective, down lower, and wherever possible have the camera kind of pointing up. So we had like ideas of how we could shoot it, but in terms of actually on the day, it was, I think I was having a conversation with Ruth last week, and she didn't have to go into a project thinking that she was going to have to educate somebody on why that wasn't appropriate to do that thing, and she said she felt more relaxed on this than quite a lot of things, and she wasn't really conscious of it. She just turned up and just had a great time on it. Mm-hmm. So I think just physically being on that level, having shared experiences that I knew that she would have, you're able to kind of have a bit of a shorthand. I didn't have to finish explaining something. She kind of got it midway through the sentence. It was like, oh yeah, completely get it. So it was a weird experience for both of us, but in a brilliant way, because to actually have that, it's the first time we worked together at all.
Really? I think I assumed that there was more of a long-standing relationship there.
No, we'd met kind of a couple of times, and we had a few mutual friends, but it was the first time we've actually worked together. But we were able to just kind of get the ball rolling and really click. And I think it is that mutual experience that you know, I have a fair idea of, you know, the things in her life that she's had to go through and vice versa. So I think that does make a deeper connection, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a fast shoot as well, wasn't it, David? We didn't really. We
Yeah.
shot the film in 2 days, so
Was
at
it
one
just 2
location.
days? God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this earlier, actually, because with shorts, you really do have to have hope that the wind is in your sails a little bit, because, and this is why I love English crew, because, you know, 2 days is not a long time. If it, you know, if the crew aren't really getting on, there's not really any time to rescue anything. It is, you know, by the time you turn up, it is what it is. And, you know, it's not like it's a 3-week shoot where you can, you know, try and, you know, change the momentum or anything that's happening. So, you know, I think we've all experienced those projects where the wind has definitely not been in your sails, but it was really lovely with this, for everything from up to the casting and everything. I think the only thing that was really, really bad is that we couldn't get walkie-talkies. That was the biggest main concern
Huh.
a couple of days, because there was so much project shooting in the UK. And I think, wasn't it Warner Brothers that came and took all of our walkie-talkies? Because we needed, because we're doing a
It was
film
all a
within a
bit of a
film.
blur.
Yeah,
2 days
we
of mayhem.
Yeah.
We didn't
needed,
have a location, I think, 4 days before we started shooting, 5 days, something like that.
yeah, we were
No, it
kind
was
of, there
really
was
late.
a couple of different ones, because obviously we needed it wheelchair accessible, and you're doing a film within a film. So we needed double the amount of equipment, the equipment to see and the equipment to also film.
Yeah.
So, and there was just a shortage of equipment, and I remember, you know, it was a last minute email, wasn't it, for a gaffer, and so there was a few challenges where obviously with the short, people get robbed to go and do these big kind of Warner Brothers things, and our walkie talkies like disappeared
Yeah.
overnight. So
And getting kit was a nightmare. Everything was a nightmare on this film. Getting everything together, and work
yeah,
with loads of people I'd never worked with before. Worked with a DOP before, who has a disability.
yeah,
Alex,
Oh,
he's
really?
brilliant.
it,
And
absolutely awesome.
yeah, absolutely fantastic DOP. And you know, but I don't think we've worked with pretty much anybody else on the set, because we can get the people. Oh, sound recordist Ollie as well. You know, we knew.
No,
And
yeah,
what I would say is shocking though is going back to what you're saying about the studios, accessible spaces, David, is I recce'd a lot of, because David was up in Peterborough and I was looking for location down here in London, and recceing, you know, small London studios where we because we knew we had to have a studio to shoot in, and so many of them are inaccessible. It's shocking, actually, really shocking, you know. And you know, that is something that BFI needs to look at, really, is kind of how can we make our workspaces, industry workspaces, accessible in you know, in the UK.
Because obviously the practicalities of enabling disabled crew, both crew and cast, to actually shoot, that need to be changed. That needs to be considered.
yeah.
And when you've got a very busy industry anyway, you know, and you know, we had to shoot this film in 2 days. That's ridiculous. And we would have liked to have got a lot more disabled crew and trainees and things like. But we didn't have to. We weren't able to. Sorry, because we just couldn't. We couldn't afford the time to do a lot of stuff. But you know, we did have some disabled crew on though, didn't we, David?
Yeah, but what was lovely is on that first morning, everything just, despite all those kind of last minute upheavals, which I think you get on everything just clicked, apart from the fact that there was another shoot in the same right next door, and all of our people kept going and joining their breakfast. And then
they hated us. That studio hated us. When are these bloody disabled people going to get out of our studio?
Really funny. So everyone was taking themselves to their breakfast, and we all had our breakfast as well. So it was just, it was lovely how everyone just kind of meshed, and all the cast wanted to lend their voice to it, and they just kind of came along. And I think there was a lot of goodwill to the production as well, which I think carried into the screen, I think.
I have just got a question in. So one of the most interesting choices in the film is that you chose to make the actor's performance within the scene that's shot really good. So this is, I'm assuming, the scene where he's on the supports and his lower legs are green screened, when it would have been quite easy to go for a laugh and make his performance bad. Can you talk about why you made this choice?
But the whole thing is between reality and not reality. So one of the earliest conversations we had was trying to mark the difference between the moments that are real and the moments that are fake. And also, I think it's quite powerful when Bella actually looks at him and she's a little bit in awe of what he can do. And we changed the aspect ratio as well in that scene. It kind of gave it a little bit of a nice kind of a Hollywood glamour kind of look.
Miramaxed it up. That was the name.
Yeah.
DOP used.
Yeah. But it was really, I think it was important to actually see that, you know, he obviously had got the acting chops and that's why he was doing it. And in that moment, it was more her kind of thinking, could I act as well as that? Could I, because I think as a disabled artist and disabled actor, you know, could I have done Eddie Redmayne's job? You know, this is Eddie Redmayne. So it was quite, I think it was one of those nuances that was quite important to get across.
Yeah,
it's also the old, sorry.
No, it is a very, very powerful moment, and her face, as you say, I didn't realize that the aspect ratio had changed on it, but yeah, it's a real moment. So Justin,
it's cliche about playing comedy straight, isn't it? You know, that the best comedy is kind of played straight. I'm not sure I always agree with that, but I feel it was the right thing to do with this, you know, for the aforementioned reasons, I suppose, you know, that we wanted to poke fun rather than, you know, and slightly be satirical rather than, you know, take the piss rather than do an out-and-out comedy, or incredibly impassioned argumentative, you know, kind of.
One of the best moments I love is Blackadder Goes Forth, where it's suddenly any moments where you can take comedy and then just notch it into serious, you know, because if you're with these characters through the laughs, when you turn that dial, it chokes you more. So what was lovely about the script is that there were those moments where you could switch the dial slightly and then switch it back, and then, you know, so, and that, I think that's it again goes back to not lecturing people. It goes back to, you know, trying to show all the little bits so that people can see it, every single side of it. And one of the comments I had was about the ending and the fact that she has to play something that she's not. And it was quite, what I loved about the script originally was, you know, leaving it like that, in the fact of, you know, she's having to just bite the bullet and do it to get the job that she's always wanted. So it's not kind of landing hard on any kind of one thing. It's trying to show all different sides of the story to get the conversation going.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a film about truth, you know, and in that moment, you know, Bella really had to become enraptured, seduced by the mistruth of this world that they were creating, you know. So the performance had to be really good and enrapturing, you know, which it's lucky we had Laurie, because I believe he probably is the next big thing, you know. He's a fantastic actor, you know. He did a good job of playing that straight, because they would play it straight, of course, you know.
Yeah.
But it was really important that she believed him, you know, and that the audience believed that this world which we all see, and that is the seductive power of, you know, these tragedy narratives, of these mistruths which we peddle as filmmakers.
A lot of Justin's work is analysing reality and not reality. And in the run up to this, I kind of said to him, I said, it's just a running theme throughout a lot of your work, which is that, you know, where the line is between the two. And I just think it really works well with this and the subject, just to highlight all the different points.
I've always been fascinated by that, you know, the weird nature of filmmaking, the fact that it is such a bizarre, mistruthful process, you know. He wouldn't be fascinated by that, you know. It's great. It's great fun.
My last question before we wrap up. Justin, you gave a really interesting answer on our stories earlier on today on Instagram and Twitter about how you felt, or whether you felt that the pandemic had affected the issue that your film explored. Can I ask you that question again for those that didn't see the story? Because I
can't remember what I said.
Uh-huh.
I mean, my belief about the pandemic is, you have the social, the medical model of disability. I believe, and this is not uncommon now. A lot of big, the government have adopted this social model of disability, which is the fact that we're disabled by society. It's not medical matters that disable you. And I think we're all disabled by society. We're all essentially disabled at the moment, but the answer to that is probably a societal one rather than a medical one. We're all holding out for a vaccine or for treatments for COVID-19, but actually, in the short term at least, it is going to be a societal answer to this social distancing, social responsibility, which gets us through this. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a difficult time for disability as well, because you look at, it was only like a month or two ago when they were talking about rationing ventilators, and disabled people would be, with serious underlying health conditions, would be at the bottom of the list because they're somehow seen as less worthy than other people to, get that ventilator when we were worried about shortage of ventilators. So it's a real, to me, it's a really important time at the moment, for disability. I'm sure you agree, David, as well.
Yeah, I think that, we're going to slowly be rebuilding our industry, and if we can kick everyone slightly up the bum to not actually rebuild all the bad stuff that we had and just kind of just move to a slightly better place, then that's certainly something I know we're going to be shouting about quite a bit, and trying to make sure that we come back to somewhere slightly better.
Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me.
We've got one question now from a lady, I think.
Aha, we got another question. Aha. David, do you want to go?
So yeah, I've actually the questions come from a young lady who I've actually just seen what she's done, because it was BBC4's Unprecedented, The Unexpected Expert, which I believe was written by Matilda, who was amazing. So what? Just reading the question.
It's a long question.
Yeah. It's about when the industry has shifted its focus. I think that quite a lot of people have shifted their focus in terms of disability representation, but up to a certain level. And I think that we've got right up to commissioning. And I think there's a bit of a glass ceiling now. And I think that quite a lot of people in the flow all the way up get and understand the issues and want to actually move to slightly more authentic portrayal. I think that final thing is in these larger budget pieces that can only be commissioned by a handful of people with that industry. And I don't think it's just a disability issue. I think that commissioners, by and large, commission people they know and they trust. So it's how do we get them to know and trust disabled filmmakers to go, yeah, we're happy to kind of to do that. And it is hard when you're pitching for stuff and you get development stuff, and sometimes the notes back can actually tell you everything in terms of, can it be slightly more like this? And you kind of go, well, no, because it's a new voice and we want it to be kind of like this. So I think there's still quite a lot to do in getting the highest levels to shift their focus and think slightly out the box. But I don't know about you, Justin.
You need a disabled equivalent of "I May Destroy You." I think, and I think we're probably a little way off that. But it's great that commissioning editors are trusting talent, trusting diverse talent, and you see some really exciting things coming in BAME. Talent's coming through, and maybe we'll get there soon. I think that I have a feeling, I'm optimistic. I think that we will.
Yeah.
And as you say, maybe this is
more than ever.
now is the time.
Opportunity for
Definitely.
change.
But I think it's also project based. I think we live in an industry that's very project led. So when you see 2 or 3 things smashing through, suddenly all the other arguments fall away. So we just need to protect these little projects, and get them over the mark. So they're in existence, and they're, very much like this short film. It was protected all the way through, and it's got through. So now it's there, so people can kind of comment on it, and
we had a lot of freedom. Hats off to you guys, because we did, didn't we? It's
yeah.
Well,
what we want to do.
you were a pleasure to work with, and I'm delighted that Verisimilitude has got into Palm Springs.
Yes.
Short Film Festival, and may there be many more. I'm sure that there will. Thank you guys, and I will thank you everyone that's watching, and have a good evening. Bye.
Thanks as well.
Bye.
Enjoy your evening. Take care.